Welcome back to the Customs GST Advisory channel of customsgst.com. We further examine the recipient responsibility to reverse the input tax credit under the provision of Section 155 of the CGST Act, 2017. Can the GST Department simply say, Section 155 places the burden on you, therefore you must prove your supplier deposited GST? At first glance, that argument appears convincing. But once we carefully read the CGST Act, that interpretation begins to collapse. Because Section 155 is not a charging provision, it is not a machinery provision. It is merely a rule regarding burden of proof. Today, let's understand why this distinction could completely change the legal debate surrounding Section 16(2)(c). Section 155 is surprisingly short. It merely states, whenever a person claims input tax credit, the burden of proving that claim lies upon that person. Notice what the section does not say. It does not say, prove that your supplier deposited tax. It does not say, investigate your supplier. It does not say, verify GSTN payment records. Nor does it say, monitor your supplier's future compliance. The section simply allocates the burden of proof, nothing more. Burden of proof is not burden of compliance. This is one of the oldest principles of jurisprudence. A rule of evidence tells the court who must establish certain facts. It does not create new legal obligations. For example, suppose a person claims ownership of property. The burden lies upon him, but the Evidence Act never requires him to prove facts that exist only inside someone else's private records. Exactly the same principle applies here. Section 155 merely asks, can you establish your eligibility? It does not expand what eligibility means. Eligibility is defined elsewhere. Eligibility comes from Section 16, not Section 155. Section 155 cannot enlarge Section 16, nor can it insert new conditions. Otherwise, an evidentiary provision would become a substantive charging provision. That is legally impermissible. What can recipient actually prove? The recipient can prove first tax invoice, second receipt of goods, third receipt of services, fourth payment to supplier, fifth business use, sixth books of accounts, seventh GSTR2B. These are facts within his own knowledge. These are facts capable of proof. What cannot recipient prove? Now consider what department expects. Can recipient verify supplier's electronic cash ledger? No, he cannot prove electronic credit ledger. No, he cannot prove GSTR3B computation. No, he cannot prove tax adjustment. No, he cannot prove adjudication. No, he cannot prove future defaults. No, he cannot prove departmental recovery. No, he cannot prove all these facts lie exclusively with first with supplier, second with GSTN, and third with department. The recipient has absolutely no statutory access. Can Section 155 require impossible proof? Here lies the constitutional difficulty. Law never expects performance of an impossible act. If Parliament intended recipient to prove supplier's payment, then Parliament or delegated authority should also have created a verification portal, invoice-wise payment confirmation statutory certificate, communication mechanism, inspection rights, or GSTN verification. None of these exist. Therefore, Section 155 cannot be interpreted to require proof of facts that the law itself makes impossible to verify. In reality, Section 41 changes everything. Now read Section 16(2)(c) carefully. It says subject to Section 41. This is extremely important. Parliament itself chose Section 41 as the machinery for supplier default. Therefore, supplier default cannot bypass Section 41 by invoking Section 155. Section 155 cannot fill legislative gaps. Evidence provisions cannot replace statutory machinery. Why this interpretation is dangerous? Suppose tomorrow department argues, you failed to prove supplier paid tax. Immediately ask how. By what statutory mechanism? Where does the Act permit me to verify supplier's payment? Which GST portal provides invoice-wise payment verification? Which rule requires department to notify me? All answers is absolute silence. The statute gives no answer. The core legal principle. This entire controversy can be summarized in one sentence. Section 155 merely allocates burden of proof. It cannot convert the recipient into an auditor of every supplier in India, nor can it transform an evidentiary rule into a substantive liability. Let us conclude this topic. The real controversy under Section 16(2)(c) is not simply whether supplier paid tax. The real controversy is whether Parliament has created a complete legal mechanism enabling the recipient to know, verify, and respond to supplier default. Until such machinery exists, Section 155 cannot be stretched beyond its purpose. Evidence provisions cannot create substantive obligations. And burden of proof cannot become burden of impossibility. If you found this legal analysis useful, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and visit customsgst.com for more detailed advice and discussions on GST, customs, and indirect tax litigation. Thank you for watching.